Okay, so building terminology. We're going to come back later and watch this video. So here's a facade. The facade is the face of the building. Usually the front of the building is called the front facade that looks out onto a street, but every side really is a facade, the back facade, the rear facade. We talked about stick building last week, how they're just, essentially cutting the 2x4s or 2x6s on site and building them up, almost like an erector set. Roof pitch. We haven't talked about roof pitch. I know I talked about it in my intro class some. So it's the angle or pitch of a roof. So some of these slides you may have seen from my intro. If you didn't have me for intro, you may not have. And it calculates the rise over the run. So it's the number of inches across versus inches up. And you always do it as a number over 12. And it's called either the pitch or the slope. So the span is the whole dimension of the roof from overhang to overhang. That's the span. The rise and run give you your pitch or your slope. So a 212 pitch is really, really shallow. A flat roof is 012, although it's slightly pitched. It's usually about a 112. 412 pitch has a little bit more. 812 pitch more. When we get up to 1212 pitch down here, here's a 512, here's 812. This is a 45-degree angle because for every 12 inches we go over, we're going up 12 inches. So when someone talks about roof pitch, that's all they're talking about. It's the rise over the run. The run is always defined as a 12, and the rise is how many inches it goes up for every 12 inches it goes over. And then there's all different kinds of roof types. I put both these on because they show different things, but a shed roof just slopes on one side. Flat roof is flat. The gable roof is probably what we're most familiar with seeing around, and the hip roof. So the gable has two sides to the roof, and a hip slopes on all four sides. All of these slopes have to be the same, so they meet at the same ridge point. The mansard is taking a hip roof and kind of cutting off the top. Palos Heights is filled with mansard roofs. A gabrel roof is like a barn roof, so it's faceted into four sections. A combination roof, this one is a hip with a gable. And then here's a butterfly roof. This angles down. You don't see these in this climate because of heavy snow loads, but popular in California. And then here's other roof types too. So, there's lots of different combinations, but these are the main ones that you need to know, or you should know. So again, a gable roof, it's the most classic kind of roof you have, and it's usually used in areas of the world where there's cold or temperate climates because we can shed the snow off of our roof, right? And you're sloping in opposite directions, and it's just pretty straightforward. The hip roof slopes in all four directions. This is what Frank Lloyd Wright loved to use in his prairie houses, was a hip roof. And it can be a fairly gentle slope. It can be a really steep slope. But it has to be the same slope on this side and this side so that this edge matches. So cupola sits on top of the roof, and it's often decorative. I mean, they used to be like in old Victorian houses, they would have these up there and they would go out so they could look out to sea and see the ships coming in. But nowadays, if you see them, it's mostly decorative. A dormer is an extension outside of the roof. And that allows, so if I have a simple gable roof here, if I put a dormer on, I've gained more living space in this area right here. Sometimes they're called rooftop windows, but it gives me more living space without having to have the whole roof extended. Okay, now we're going to get into the kinds of walls. We're going to start at the roof and go down. So this is a parapet wall. This is used most with flat roofs because you've got all of this, wherever you see a roof and it's flat, you're looking at something that comes above it because we've got all this flashing insulation. And so our roof starts below the top of the wall. And the parapet just is a covering in front of the wall. It could be used as a balcony too. If you had a walkway out here, the parapet wall can be your balcony wall. but it covers what happens to finish off the roof with a flat roof. So the next thing I want to talk about is eaves. The eave is the overhang away from the building structure that is on the underside of the roof structure. So this is my roof structure, and here's our stud wall, and here's our bottom cord for our truss, and here's our truss that supports our roof. And we'd have our roofing on top of here. And this is a drip edge to keep the water away from it. And the fascia board is the underside of the eave. Or, wait, I'm sorry, the fascia board is this piece right here. This one has a cover. It doesn't always have a cover. And the soffit is the underside of the eave. So this whole system is called an eave. It's the overhang of the roof. And the reason you do an eave is you want to get the water to shed away from the building. So you'll have these long, deeper eaves, and it keeps the water when it rains. It comes down the roof and it sheds off over here away from the building and not at the base of your building. They're also used in a lot of architecture to provide shading. So if you had big eaves on the south side, you would protect your building from the summer sun. Our next one is the fascia. So we already saw that. So this whole thing is called the eave, and the fascia board is the part right at the front that you see, and it holds the gutter. And the soffit, again, is what's underneath. Here's our soffit, fascia, and gutter. So a load-bearing wall, and I covered up my wall thing here. A load-bearing wall is a wall that's designed to take structural loads from the roof on down. So a load-bearing wall is going to take loads from above and transfer it down to the foundation. And we're going to talk about foundations in a little bit. So what we have is the load-bearing wall bears the weight of the elements above. So we've got a load-bearing wall. When we want to open up the load-bearing wall, we have to put a beam across here to open up that wall. So then the load comes down, it goes across the beam, and then transfers over. If we didn't do that, we'd get a sagging on the beam. So we have a beam or a header wherever we have an opening on a load-bearing wall. So non-load-bearing walls, typically in the center of spaces or running perpendicular to your structural wall, they don't take any load. So this is a load-bearing wall. See, there's a column down here. So this load is coming all the way down here. I don't know why they're saying this is a non-load-bearing wall, but the load is coming down all the way to the center. If I had another wall coming in this direction, that would be a non-load-bearing wall because it's not taking any load and transferring it down to the foundation. So these exterior walls are transferring the load down to the foundation and footing. This interior system of walls is transferring it down to a column that is holding up a beam underneath the center of the house, and there would be a footing under those columns. So you should look at your own house and figure out where the load-bearing walls are. And if you have a load-bearing wall, you have to be careful about opening it up. If you have a non-load-bearing wall, you can move things around very easily. So the stud, in this country, for residential framing, we use wood studs. And the wood stud is this piece right here. It's the support that creates the wall. And then the drywall is attached to it. If it's on the exterior, insulation is put between the studs. And you have a head plate, the stud. Here's our door opening, so I've got a door header on here. And then you've got a sole plate at the bottom that connects to the subfloor. Here's our joist supporting the subfloor. So this is our subfloor. And again, the plaster at the end of the wall. So rough opening is another term that you need to know. Rough opening is the framed opening that a door or window fits into. So you have to figure out how big your door or window is. And the door or window includes the frame or around the actual door or window. And then you have to make the rough opening usually a couple inches wider than your door or window. And then you install the door and window in there, and you put shims in there to hold it in place. And the reason you make it wider is if you're a little crooked or something, you've got some play on this to get it in. You'd never make it the exact same size as the window. Sheathing is the protected layer that goes onto the studs and joists to protect a building. So sheathing is, here's wood sheathing, And we've got different insulation. We've got a mesh board, and this looks like some kind of stucco barrier on it. But sheathing are the layer of boards or materials applied to the studs. It both strengthens it and serves as weatherproofing for the exterior. And then the last layer is usually decorative because you want your building to look nice. Casement window is a window that opens on the side. We're going to talk about windows again later, but casement window opens on the side. It's either a crank or a push out. Casement windows can also open in, but it's always hinged on the side. A double hung window is a window that has two sashes, and this is what most of us have in our house. And the top sash goes down and the bottom sash goes up. I live in an old house, and it has double hung windows, except the top one has been painted shut so many times it doesn't open, just my bottom one opens. A single hung is where only the bottom sash opens. And the reason you want a double hung is air flows through the bottom and out the top because hot air rises, and so you get good airflow in the house. With a single hung, you're just getting the airflow at the bottom. You're not getting this nice draft through the upper and lower parts. And then a sash is the frame. So this is the sash that holds the glass in a window. So here's a window frame. That's the head of the window. The glass is inside, and it can have divided lights or not. These are grills for divided lights. And then the rails, the sash is the part that goes around the glass that holds the glass in place. And then the jamb is what's up against the wall. So those are all things that you'll hear people talk about. A transom is a window that's above a door or above another window. In older houses, the transoms used to be active. They would open up, and again, it was to get that hot air out. You would see them in kitchens. So the transom window could open up and you'd get nice airflow and get that hot air out or the cooking smells or out of the house. And then my last slide on this one is the sill is the part on the window. I always tell people it's the part where you put your plants. So here's the window. You've got an interior and an exterior sill. The interior sill is usually a little deeper, and it can be very deep depending on your wall construction. So that's a little bit more about terminology.